stoplights, books, billboards, WhatsApp messages, YouTube videos, blogs, Netflix series, radio programs, nutritional labels, news articles, party flyers, town criers, election campaign placards, graphic tees, magazines, films, documentaries, tweets, posts, TikToks, snaps, letters, texts, and the like. Every day, at all times, everywhere, people are bombarded with tons of information coming at us through various media. And while it may be not as easy for others, for many of us in this conversation, we're a little lucky that we have some of the skills to be able to navigate and filter information to get to what is real and what's not. Or do we? Fake news, alternative facts, photoshopping, even AI sometimes cause us to doubt what we think we know. These are among the reasons for a conversation such as this one today and why it's so important. So welcome to the World Association for Christian Communication Caribbean in collaboration with the University of the West Indies, MONA, and UNESCO, a conversation on media literacy. The topic, media literacy, voices of experts, journalists, and students. My name is Kalanda Wilmoth. I am going to moderate the session this morning. I'm a graduate of Carimac, the best and only thing to do if you're going to attend the University of the West Indies, MONA. So you're in the right place. This conversation, for me, is a little well overdue. I have a 14-year-old who is in high school now, and before she was in high school, I was a part of the PTA at her prep school. And I remember having a conversation with Dr. Barnes, this was pre-pandemic, about doing a media literacy session with the teachers and the parents as an activity the PTA would do, because it became very clear to me that when I was growing up, news 7 o'clock, TV, news, RJR radio, news, and Gleaner newspaper. And you knew that you knew that that's where the news was. And there's, even though at the time I didn't know that the journalists and the news leaders would have done the work to make sure that that's credible information that people could trust, but you knew that growing up. And now I'm thinking to myself, I remember when it happened, I was thinking, how does my daughter know what's true? Because she'd spend a lot of time on social media or watching foolishness on YouTube, or some of it sensible. But you know, YouTube videos are foolishness with her friends. How will children know what's news and what's real news and what's fake? That's what struck me. And then, of course, the pandemic came and everything got turned upside down, so it never happened. So for me, I'm happy to be part of this conversation today, because even though I'm not doing it at my daughter's school, when I planned, I'm hoping to take away some information to go do it at the school that she's at now, because I think it's important. So today's conversation, we're hoping to hear from your students. Let's see all the students, everyone who is a student, not like a student of life. We're not being so general. Dr. White, you can put, yeah, no. Dr. White, you can put your hand down. Okay, students whose class time this is now, put your hand up for me. Thank you. So we're hoping to hear from you today, because you're very important to the conversation as we try to navigate this today. All right, so to help us get started, we invite Sandra Clenham, Vice President of World Association for Christian Communication Caribbean, to provide the invocation. Oh, it's going to be online because we're having a hybrid session. Forgot to tell you that. So some of our participants will beam in. Here we go.
Let us pray. Vita na hemel, Dios mío, mon Dios, dear Lord, thank you for bringing us to this forum. We are praying for a good and effective discussion when we are going through the media literacy. Guide and lead the speakers, the students, the organizers, and all attending this forum. Bless the work of WAC all over the world while they're reaching their goals by preaching communication rights. In a world of diverse ethnicity, languages, color, status, religion, we all need good communicators in reaching social justice. We are praying for everyone who is facing violence around the world and proclaiming peace and justice for all. We are praying for protection, dear Lord, in everything that we are doing. Let us love and encourage one another. Help us, Lord. Help us building and be with us. Be with everything and be with everything what we are doing. Ininaneng fu Santa Masra Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Sandra Clenem, Vice President of the World Association for Christian Communicators Caribbean. So today, just to give you an idea of how we're going to set up, we will have a few comments and remarks from different members who are associated either with the entities listed there or have some contribution to the conversation. After which we'll invite our panelists to join. 2 will join physically, the other 2 will be online, and we will set out to have a conversation about media and information literacy. So to get us started, we'll invite the director of CARIMAC, Dr. Livingston White, to officially provide the official welcome for today's event.
Thank you, Mr. Wilmot. Mr. Embert Charles, President, the World Association of Christian Communication Global. Dr. Corinne Barnes, the World Association of Christian Communication Caribbean. Dr. Paul Hector, Advisor for Communication and Information, UNESCO, Multi-Sectoral Regional Office for the Caribbean. Dr. Patrick Prendergast, Campus Director, the University of the West Indies, Western Jamaica Campus. Ms. Sonia Gill, Secretary General of the Caribbean Broadcasting Union. Kiran Miraj, President of the Media Institute of the Caribbean. Wesley Gibbons, journalist and expert on our panel today. Students of Com 1001. Ladies and gentlemen, in the room at CARIMAC Annex 2 and online, good day to you all. On behalf of the Caribbean School of Media and Communication, CARIMAC, at the University of the West Indies Mona campus, welcome to today's conversation on media literacy, which is being hosted in collaboration with the Caribbean Regional Network of the World Association of Christian Communication and UNESCO. CARIMAC is a school of media and communication offering undergraduate degree programs in animation, digital media production, film production, integrated marketing, communication, and journalism, and graduate degrees in media management and communication for social and behavior change, and integrated marketing communication as well. Our students continue to be exposed to a curriculum which underscores the important role of communication and media in sustainable development. And today's event reinforces the need to continue improving media literacies so that our citizens around the world will be better able to exercise their right to communicate while being critical consumers and producers of content. CARIMAC is pleased to be an institutional member of the WACC for almost 20 years. We support the vision of communication for all and the mission to promote communication as a basic human right, essential to people's dignity and sense of community. I encourage those of you who have a keen interest in ensuring that human beings have a right to communicate openly and democratically about events that affect their lives to join the World Association of Christian Communication. Congratulations to the organizers of today's event. I can see the regional representation on the panel for today, and I know we can expect a stimulating conversation from the participating experts, journalists, and students. All the best for a productive discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. White. And to keep us going, we'll now invite Dr. Paul Hector, Information and Communication Advisor, UNESCO Caribbean, to bring some remarks.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone, and please allow me to adopt the protocol which has been so ably established by Dr. White. So first of all, let me just say how honored I feel to be here at CARIMAC. Unfortunately, I was not a graduate of the best faculty as I've learned, but I can proudly say that I'm a Pelican. I studied engineering, University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. So truly a pleasure to be here. So, you know, really, it's great to be here to participate in this conversation because this is something which is very timely. As many of you may know, just a few weeks ago, the 24th to 31st of October, there was a celebration, the global celebration of Media and Information Literacy Week. I don't know how many of you are aware also that Jamaica was actually instrumental in, you know, the adoption of this week, and also in terms of raising the visibility of MIL throughout the UN. Now, as we've heard, you know, communication, this is something which is around us, everywhere, every day. So of course, elevating awareness and engagement around this very critical topic of media and information literacy is really essential if we're going to achieve this objective of inclusive, just, sustainable, and of course, peaceful societies. And at this time, we, you know, really, we need peace. And there's so many examples of the ways in which communication has inflamed conflict, has triggered conflict, hate speech, and so forth. As you know, we live in a very rapidly evolving world where digital networks have become truly central to our daily existence. And we haven't reached 100% coverage yet, but now we're somewhere around 60% of coverage of the global population. That is in terms of access to internet and many of these digital platforms. Of course, these platforms, they are truly a boon. They offer immense opportunities for learning, for knowledge exchange, community engagement, social activism, new forms of employment, and as we heard, new forms of leisure and entertainment. At the same time, they're also very fundamentally shifting the societies in which they live, introducing new paradigms, norms, and of course, significant challenges. We know that disinformation and misinformation are some of these big challenges, also hate speech, and also something which poses a bit of a challenge to freedom of expression. Other types of communication which we call potentially harmful content, which perhaps don't fully contravene some of these laws, but are at the same time very troubling and concerning. And digital platforms in which much of this content exists pose ethical challenges and can also undermine some of these very valuable human rights, which are really central to human dignity. If we just take one little example, in the area of misinformation and disinformation, these are things which are really having far-reaching, tangible, and adverse societal effects. I cite one study, The Cost of Lies, assessing the human and financial impact of COVID-19 related online misinformation on the United Kingdom. And this is a study which set out to quantify what the impact of disinformation around the issue of mask wearing impacted on the United Kingdom. And they looked at a very specific period, the 1st of April to the 10th of November 2020. And they were able to identify, or rather attribute 2,187 hospitalizations and 509 deaths, and link this to the surge in online mis and disinformation. And they were also able to quantify the impact, the financial impact on the National Health Service of the United Kingdom. And of course, this is something which taxpayers pay for. And this was estimated at 22.1 million British pounds. And when they looked at, let's say, broader economic impacts across the society, this was something like $3.6 billion, a loss to the UK economy, the GDP. So these are really, really serious things. And of course, this begs the question, how exactly and to what extent is misinformation and disinformation costing us here in the Caribbean? You know, I'm sure we know about an incident recently which, you know, caused a lot of disruption and is still causing disruption. So misinformation and disinformation, it really matters. So of course at UNESCO, we see this as really a crucial skill for navigating the world. We see the digital transformation affecting every aspect of life: work, learning, leisure, civic participation. So truly, MIL, this is something which is really critical for equipping people to participate in this new world. And again, it's also very fundamental to ensuring inclusion of all groups, participation, social cohesion, and of course, innovation. So we need to master the skills to use these digital tools. So at the same time, we really need to be holistic. Education, basic literacy, will always be the bedrock on which the understanding, the awareness, which is really crucial for empowering the whole gamut of rights and developing other literacies will be built. But at the same time, we must also be conscientious of what are the many online and offline barriers, what are the inequalities, structural, other vulnerabilities that are hindering people from realizing their full potential. And this is, of course, essential if we are to build the sort of inclusive, informed societies that are not only resilient in the face of new online challenges, but are also going to empower, you know, people here in the Caribbean to be the creators and innovators who can identify the new opportunities, not only for their own well-being, but also for the common good of the societies in which we find ourselves. So again, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I really look forward to working with CARIMAC, the other participants online, to support the necessary research, the advocacy, capacity building, and whatever other strategies that can really advance this cause of leveraging communication for human development and advancement. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hector. Timely reminder there that we should count the cost of not having good MIL, as well as the value to society of having good media and communication, media and information literacy. At this time, we'd invite comments from Mbert Charles, the president, the World Association of Christian Communication. This is another of our digital, online video presentations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and I want to recognize all the colleagues in the room and online, many of whom I have shared various platforms with. I have to say I'm starting up as announcing I'm a proud graduate of CARIMAC, and in fact, I don't recognize the room anymore. It's been quite a while. But what I want to put into context is that my own journey and participation in WAC already started at CARIMAC, having received a scholarship from WAC to study communication and social sciences at the time, and at the same time enlisted as a member of WAC. Subsequently, I went on to become one of the founding members of WAC Caribbean, which was not an original region of WAC, but came about as a result of ensuring diversity in communication and diversity in expression within the WAC global family. Subsequently, I moved on to the board of directors and eventually be elected as president. The rest is history, which can be read on the WAC website. But I want to extend a special welcome to the students who are participating in this forum today, and to thank UNESCO for this collaboration. Is a discussion we had not too long ago, and in the insistence of the current president, Corinne Barnes, that we agreed that we should proceed with this collaboration and continue the discussion on media literacy. It's not a subject that is new. At the time, as a student, some of you may recall in your own research, there was a publication put out by UNESCO called the Many Voices, One World, which was the report of the McBride Commission on the state of communication globally. WAC was a critical part of this exercise and continues to be a critical part of ensuring digital justice, media literacy, diversity in communication, and also the protection of journalists around the world. For us, we see this collaboration as having a number of objectives and goals. One, we want to reach out to the students and other persons in the room who may not be, to become a member of WAC. WAC is a global NGO, and do not be misled by the name. It says World Association for Christian Communication. We are not an evangelistic organization. That name has been retained because of WAC's birth, coming out of the World Council of Churches being the communication arm of the World Council of Churches and becoming eventually an NGO on its own. WAC membership spans the entire globe and the regions, apart from the Caribbean, Latin America, Africa, North America, and Canada, the UK and Europe, Middle East, Asia Pacific, and I think I didn't mention Africa as well. So it's a very broad-based organization which really provides opportunities for participation in this mission of ensuring diversity and preserving indigenous communication rights. Secondly, apart from membership, WAC has an extensive resource in communication. WAC has published several books, has facilitated the publication of other books by authors, has been involved in producing several reports on communication, has produced several toolkits, the most recent being a toolkit on digital justice, which you can avail yourself to on the WAC website. Is a resource which is free. One of the most significant aspects of our work is monitoring the media. And as far back as 1995, WAC started a media monitoring exercise to gauge gender representation in the media. And this exercise has been very, very instructive for planners around the world and also for media organizations around the world. The data has showed us that we still have a long way to go. And based on the analysis of the authors of this report, if we were to close the gap, the gender gap in media representation, we need another 67 years based on the results of the 2020 findings of the survey. So we have a long way to go, but WAC is committed to that exercise in providing the tools as well as the resources for ensuring we have more diversity in the media, which makes me segue into the role WAC plays in ensuring that that work is done. WAC attempts to acquire resources from funding agencies within the developed world to fund appropriate projects in the developing countries. Some of the examples include setting up community radio stations, funding work on the use of indigenous languages. In the case of St. Lucia, WAC has funded a project where the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, have been translated into the Creole language. So these are just by way of examples. But I want to just, in my brief remarks, and I'm hoping that in the course of the discussion, these issues will be ventilated a little more, just to say that we are mindful of some of the disturbing trends that are happening within media globally. Hence the reason and the importance of an exercise on media literacy. We have noticed the prominence and the expansion of hate speech in the media, and it's creeping into our region. The Caribbean society, where Qigong was seen as a very progressive way of getting people to converse. There was fun, there was the cultural expression in Qigong, but that is being displaced by an extended, going to the extreme ends of Movelang, which is part of Qigong. You have language being used, which is essentially being borrowed from North America and some of the far right extremists of Europe. So we have to be mindful, and I'm sure some of the presenters are able enough to bring this to the fore. We have to be mindful that our people within the Caribbean still need the tools to interrogate and consume media. As Agri Brown, the former director of CARIMAC, usually says, communication is about the transfer of meaning. And we have to always try to remember, as communicators, what we mean, what the meaning we intend to communicate when we send a message across. With these brief remarks, I want to wish that we all have a very fruitful and productive discussion, and that this exercise will form the basis of further collaboration between WAC and CARIMAC, as well as WAC and the wider University of the West Indies. Thank you very much and have a productive seminar.
Charge, Mr. Charles, the Edinburgh Charles President of World Association of Christian Communication Global. And now to the main presentation, which will be delivered by Mr. Wesley Gibbons. Wesley Gibbons subscribes to the view that media and information literacy represents an enlightened human rights approach to addressing the challenges of an expanding media landscape. His work in 2015 on building a framework for media self-regulation in the Caribbean proposed that media literacy should be among the functions of independent bodies emerging from the media industry. He has since participated in numerous activities related to the subject, hosted by bodies such as UNESCO, the Media Institute of the Caribbean, the Caribbean Broadcasting Union, and the Global Forum for Media Development. In 2017, he participated in the Global Media and Information Literacy activities in Jamaica, and again made the case that such a strategy was the best way of ensuring that even as the region recognizes the negative impact of misinformation and disinformation, it must ensure that measures to address those issues do not negatively impact freedom of expression and freedom of the press. Ladies and gentlemen, the address by Mr. Wesley Gibbons, journalist, Trinidad and Tobago.
It is a great pleasure to open today's conversation on media literacy in the Caribbean. The organizers have assembled a strong cross-section of stakeholders and other interested parties. Special thanks to my colleague of long-standing, Dr. Corinne Barnes, who I know shares my passion for today's important subject. Judging from the introduction to me, you may have detected that I feel very strongly that media and information literacy, intrinsically including a higher level of digital literacy, provides us with an opportunity to achieve a human rights compliant approach to addressing issues of misinformation and disinformation and other mass communication dysfunctionalities. The overriding assumption is that equipping consumers of media content with an ability to distinguish fact from fiction and truth from lies has the potential to greatly diminish the impact of the unreliable supply of news, information, and other content. This is an important issue to consider, especially if we concede that digital content in particular will continue to grow and escape even through the finest mesh of regulation. More prohibition, as attractive as they appear to Caribbean decision makers, is thus destined to be futile. Through demand-oriented mill, both direct and collateral social damage can be avoided, or at least minimized. The lower the demand, the greater the hindrance to supply. This, however, does not provide a comprehensive shield. So most defenders of rights agree that the protections currently provided to the subjects of social media content, and all media content, under common law and statute, should continue to apply. Even the founding principles of free speech, as captured by Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, identifies duties and responsibilities, and with them, widely accepted limitations. There are lively debates regarding the application of such limitations. This resonates alongside what we have to consider on questions of media and information literacy. For example, there are important nuances to consider when it comes to this, things such as defamation, threats to national security, and incitement to discrimination, hostility, or violence. There is also the principle that addresses the infringement of other rights, such as privacy, to cite one example. This should clear the air among those under the misguided assumption that people who advocate for freedom of expression are somehow envisaging a situation of untrammeled liberty. Though it is true, I might add, that more freedom is to be preferred over less freedom. Media and information literacy addresses such a concern at a number of different levels by actively engaging a wide cross-section of interested parties, inclusive of state and non-state actors, with a special role for those involved in mass communication. And this is not restricted to formal media operations. It is envisaged, for example, and already the case in several countries, that school curricula should include explicit instruction on MIL. This expands traditional emphasis on critical thinking components within the school system. One indirect impact of this is that the state becomes specifically involved in administering and evaluating progress on this as a national responsibility. There is also the prospect through this of wider youth engagement in dissecting and influencing digital trends and becoming effective advocates for responsible media consumption. There should also be the impact of greater awareness of wider societal responsibilities on this question. Already, for example, we're witnessing in some countries the development of formal and informal collaborations involving both state and non-state actors. The media industry is a natural part of such a process. The opportunities for new vistas for cooperation on human rights are vast, especially since we recognize a role for greater public participation in promotion of male values. All of this should also be so, whatever the specifics of other tensions, there will continue to be other tensions. We can participate and collaborate even while challenging a number of things. These include the absence of stronger, more effective access to information laws, the persistence of criminal defamation, routinized regimes of censorship, and a tendency to roll back some gains through the emergence of cybercrime and other new laws, some of which are serving to reintroduce and reinforce highly nuanced concepts such as insulting and offensive speech, decency, and public order concerns. Our collaborators for this event would also be aware of the fact that blasphemy and blasphemous libel remain highly problematic in some jurisdictions, to the extent they can be prosecutable under criminal law and act as a check on freedom of expression. It is true that we will live in a time of great urgency on questions of social peace and cohesion, and that prompt actions are required to address clear violations of proper human conduct. This is therefore not a case to diminish the value of law enforcement and enlightened legislative change. They will continue to be necessary. The option, however, exists to either police vast virtual spaces, something that is already recognized as highly implausible and ineffective, or to focus on enlightened consumer demand. Follow current actions to rein in international big tech, for example, and you will see how focusing on the platforms is of highly limited impact. MIL is thus not a short-term prescription or easy one. Witness decades-long social programs to redirect human conduct on the inimical impacts of tobacco use, to cite an example, an outstanding example. They have been largely successful where they have been rigorous. The thrust in that instance was to focus on consumer demand, even as action was taken to rein in production. The latter being questionable, and that's a different discussion we can have. Today's event is significant in that as a region, we have chosen a path of collaborative effort involving media, academia, regulators, and a host of other partners to consider the next steps. This is also part of a global effort with strong participation from other countries whose best and worst practices are on show for our study and adoption where necessary. The fact that the UN system has taken the lead in this is significant, since it also signals wider developmental concerns. Though we have been considering this for some time now, we must however be clear that it's still early days. In a sense, the Media Institute of the Caribbean, through our journalism instruction, has initiated a variety of journalistic techniques to add clarity to reportage on public interest issues. I would contend that things such as timelines, illustrated data, and explainer sidebars, through these we have promoted actions that can add to greater levels of understanding of journalistic content. And that's just one field of it. However, fact-checking needs to be promoted as both a private and public exercise. Current global events, for example, have even signaled a need to sometimes fact-check the fact-checkers. In this regard, generative AI presents a variety of challenges and striking opportunities. Ignore or dismiss it at your peril, I say. CARIMAC can lead the way regionally as the premier tertiary institution associated with novel programs to entrench MIL values in communication, training, and education. The CBU is also here to lead the way as an industry leader to ensure there is buy-in from our media enterprises. More of it needs to happen. We also need to accelerate the pace of the work. The speed of change must be matched by timely and enlightened interventions. Such an approach is now well established as a more effective intervention than attempting to impose regimes of prohibition. Nearly everywhere there is a growing recognition that stemming the flow of multidirectional content is best addressed at the ports of entry. I think once we muster sufficient will, we can take the required foundational steps. But again, this is a long-haul exercise. And as TNT's Black Stalin once memorably argued, we can make it if we try. Just a little harder. Thank you very much.
Okay, all right. We're back. Marked there by Wesley Gibbons, for this conversation on media literacy. I'm going to throw to the students even as I welcome the panelists so that we can dive into this conversation a little bit more, pick up from some of the points that that he's made. For our in-person and our hybrid panel today, let me introduce, coming to the stage, Dr. Patrick Prendergast, Campus Director at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Western Jamaica Campus in Montego Bay, and Senior Lecturer in Development Communication at the Caribbean School of Media and Communication. Dr. Prendergast has a wide-ranging, multi-level experience in teaching, curriculum development, cultural and creative arts, and educational administration, as well as program planning, project management, and environmental education and communication. Let him feel welcome, students, those who are, well, everybody else, but I'm a little concerned about the students now. And also, so I'm going to do it this way. Let's do one in person, one online. And welcome Miss Sonia Gill, attorney at law. She's the Secretary General of the Caribbean Broadcasting Union. She's joining us from Barbados. Are you in Barbados, Sonia, or somewhere else?
I'm currently at the CBU headquarters in Barbados, just
Brilliant.
returned from Trinidad and Tobago.
Maybe we should see her on so that we could see her lovely and lively face. All right, just a moment. Sonia is an attorney at law, a development practitioner, and former broadcast journalist and media regulator. She's also the first woman to be appointed as Secretary General of the CBU. She held the post of Assistant Executive Director. Okay, there we are. You'd have to show me. Assistant Executive Director and Executive Director Acting of the Broadcasting Commission of Jamaica for over a decade. And during that time, she was a key member of the team that pioneered work in media and information literacy training for student teachers, as well as making it an optional component of the primary school syllabus. At the CBU, she has spearheaded the UNESCO-supported projects on building the capacity of member media houses in integrating media and information literacy into their content and production policies. And under her stewardship at the CBU, she also introduced the first ever Caribbean Media Awards for the advancement of media and information literacy in radio, television, print, and digital media. Let her feel welcome. Thank you for joining us today, Sonia. And now we jump back to in-person and welcome Corporal Kayla Keane, even though she did say not representing the JCF today. They're striking red in solidarity with Dr. Barnes there. A memo was passed and they both got it. All right, so Corporal Keane is the head of the Jamaica Constabulary Force's social media team. She has extensive experience in the use of platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Threads, X, TikTok, and I'm sure whichever other ones that exist, she knows it. She's currently a final year student of CARIMAC's, the Master of Arts in Integrated Media and Integrated Marketing Communication, which is my program. I shouldn't have gotten that wrong, right? At the University of the West Indies. Welcome, Kayla. And let's also now welcome Ms. Kiran Maharaj, President and co-founder of the Media Institute of the Caribbean. She has been actively involved in media and information literacy awareness since 2017. She has co-authored and led the research on UNESCO's global pilot study on media viability indicators with Jamaica as the case study. And she was lead researcher on the situation report on media literacy, disinformation, and misinformation in the Caribbean. Welcome, Kieran. Okay, and so the way we set this up, you would have heard, and I'm not even going to quiz the students about what some of Mr. Gibbings' comments, but I will come to you at some point to get some ideas from you. But Kayla, I want you to start us off. The microphone is right there. I want you to help us to open the discussion about how media and information literacy, how aware would you say students, or maybe the youth, are when it comes to things such as misinformation and disinformation? What level of awareness do you think exists among that cohort?
All right, thank you, Kalando. All right, so there is a level of awareness, probably in the 40s. So less than half of students are very aware of misinformation and disinformation. There actually appears to be a strong correlation between generational age cohort and the ability to perceive what is real and what's not. So among persons who are millennial, it's a little bit higher, with about 58% of them being aware of what is correct and what is not. And there's a marginal difference between them and high schoolers. Just a few percent, maybe about 2%. But what concerns me is the fact that students at the university level are not able to decipher between fact and fiction. As the persons who are going to be leading these conversations very soon, it is concerning that they are not able to ably decipher between what is real and fake. And as you said before, persons from those generational cohorts, millennials and Gen Xers, for example, they gather, Gen Zers rather, they gather their information predominantly online. Most of the research is actually showing that they go online for news, so they will not be trying to get home for 7 because they won't be consuming news from that source. So with that phenomena, it is very important that they are able to decipher what is real and what is fake. And how this shows up is sometimes you will get a message from someone within those generational cohorts on WhatsApp about something that immediately you look at it and you know it's not real. But for some reason, they're not able to say, oh, this has the Gleaner logo, for example, but this is definitely not from Gleaner. Or, as some of us would do, if we're not sure, we'd actually go to the site to check.
Right.
Some of them will even circumvent that route and just believe what they see. Yes.
Okay. So speaking there of some, thank you, Kayla, some skills that we need. Can I come to the audience? And is there a mic? Because I would like to see how many of the students in this room might be able to even challenge Kayla's, or the mic is over here, the stats that she quoted. How many of you, yes, you have a question, or are you going to answer my question about what all right, you have to, the mic is up front here, just for our online members. We are taking a question from the audience. The young lady is walking up to the mic now, trying to get her green sweater on, because clearly it's a bit chilly, as she makes her way to the microphone to ask a question. Can you just say your name? Okay, the mic is not on. Just, okay, go ahead. All right, maybe I should just come to you until we sort out that. Sorry about that, guys.
Good morning, my name is Jada Delani, and you made reference to that we get our information online. However, you do have other news outlets that are online, and we are the target audience, as opposed to maybe going on our Facebook to get this information, or reaching home at 7 to get this information. Now, I have an issue with that you say that we don't know how to differentiate between factual information and non-factual information.
Well, she didn't say all of you, so if you know how to do it. Yeah.
I know, but it's just that I think as university graduates, I think we would, be able to know where, all right, let's say if something bad happens, like, let's not use recent current events, but something bad happens and we go on and we see it on the internet, we would be able to at least go back to maybe on a Google or somewhere and fact check this before. So that's what I'm a little bit, concerned about.
Well, thank you so much for the concerns, Jada, and I'm very glad that you have concerns so we can have a more interesting conversation. Or firstly, I said that Gen Zers and millennials predominantly get their news from social media. And additionally, I was actually quoting a research that says that about 58% of those generational age cohorts will know how to decipher, but there's a percentage that doesn't. So I'm not saying that young people don't watch traditional news or don't consume news from good sources. I'm saying that the research is showing that some young persons within your generational age cohort do not know how to decipher.
Right. So
and that's concerning. So it's not everybody, it's some of you, and the research is empirical. So yes, there is a percentage that doesn't know how to do that. And I'm sure you've seen it too. Probably you have peers who will send you something and you're like, this is not true. I can immediately look at it and know that it's not true, right?
I don't think it's just my age group. It's like, for example, you have where you'd have information circulating that's coming from JPS, or you have water lock-offs, or you have light not in certain areas, and you'd have the public relations communications officer coming out to say that, well, this is not true, this is not what's happening. So therefore, it's not just limited to us, to, as you said, but yeah, it's something that we do take.
Right, and a great example of this also is a recent earthquake. So after the earthquake, there was a lot of news circulating about the disruption of services. And for example, they were saying that a building at the cement company had collapsed. I had to go online immediately and reassure persons that, look here, this is the truth and this is what is fake from the JCF's perspective, just so there wasn't panic on top of persons already being disturbed by the earthquake. So we're not saying that everyone, Jada, but there is a percentage of persons who we are concerned about.
There still is a skill gap, right? And what I wanted to do was to get at maybe a working definition of misinformation, disinformation from among the young people. But maybe at this point, we can tap back to you for that, because I want to bring in Kieran. The terms have become well known to us, but I'm not sure if the meanings of the terms misinformation, disinformation is as well understood. What are we talking about when those words are used?
So very simply, misinformation is what I remember it as being misperceived or misconstrued, not deliberately distributed with the intent of being false. So the easiest way to remember it, misperceived, misconstrued is misinformation. Disinformation, I remember it by saying to myself, is a disrespect for truth. So anything that is really put out into the public domain or distributed that is intended to be anti-truth is disinformation. And then more recently, we've had malinformation. Malinformation tends to be information that is real, is not meant to go public, but is placed in the public domain with the intent to cause harm and to ruin reputation and so on. So those are the three that we have: mis, dis, and mal.
Students, that is, well, I suppose all of us equipping ourselves. So thanks for that, Kieran. So at the core of media, the core of media and information literacy has, on the one side, those who deal in media and information, and sometimes those folks are better skilled, like I said before, some of us who are exposed. But the impact and effects of the media and information on the public, who we can almost accept that may not be as skilled. Generally, the public is not as skilled with the filtering of information, and so they may rely on media practitioners in particular and regulators to guide and protect. Kieran, my question to you is about the role that journalists and newsrooms should play in enhancing the media and information literacy status of consumers of media. What sort of role do you think they should be playing?
I think that the responsibility is not with us only, let me say that. But I think when there are strong rumors that are circulating, things that we know are not factual, it is left to us, and it is that way now, which is why a lot of newsrooms are under great stress, to clarify it and to get to the bottom of it and to be able to tell what the truth is. So fact checking is very, very important to anyone who's a journalist working in a newsroom. But if you would allow me, and I want to thank Karamak and UNESCO for this opportunity to just show you a little bit of the dangers that exist. And this links in some ways to what the conversation was a short while ago with the student who raised it. We have a situation right now where it is becoming increasingly difficult to be able to tell the truth. And this is what the media and newsrooms have to contend with. So let me just ensure that I could play this little bit of video. And I hope you'll be able to hear just a little piece.
My full-time employees and their ability to survive.
Can you hear this?
$8 an hour
Hearing, yes.
in New York City. Foremost in all of our minds has been the loss, the grief felt by the people of Orlando. Most of us don't get our health care through the marketplace. We get it through our job, or through Medicare or Medicare. And what you should know is that thanks to the Affordable Care Act, your coverage is.
So you see what is starting to happen is that you have a lot of because of AI.
Using deep fake technology in some very funny ways.
You have a lot of fake and false information to the point where people's faces can appear. It looks like they're saying what they're saying, but they really are not. And that is the true danger with AI. And that is part of the pressure that is applied on journalists in newsrooms. Because when things like this happen, we are then the ones people go to for answers. And sometimes we don't even know. Sometimes we don't even have the time to be able to do that. I mean, and then it plagues us, not just in that regard. So it hurts the politics of a country, but then it also hurts us where religion is concerned. And so, you know, in this instance, it was a photograph of a dove, and they said that this happened on the same day that the war broke out between the Ukraine and Russia, and it went crazy and it was viral. And in truth and in fact, this video was taken about a year before and had nothing to do with that. And so these are some of the issues. The other thing is that, you know, misinformation on Facebook gets 6 times more clicks than factual. We have to ask ourselves why that is so, because with technology, you have speed. And so because of that, the information can be spread more quickly and cause more harm. Then let's think of TikTok, 62% jump in fake profiles being created. Does the typical user of TikTok understand that not everything they're seeing is real? And my short answer to that is no. And then when you look at things like all of the other social media platforms, and we're not even talking about online, because online you also have a lot of fake news websites and you could hardly tell what is real and what is not. But with all of the other social media chats, you're seeing that you know, there's a lot of information coming through those chats, coming through those pages, and it's being propagated. So I just wanted to make the point that, you know, while we're talking about the necessity for newsrooms to have fact checkers, and I think that that is at core now of what we have to do. We are also under the pressure of having small revenues. A lot of our independent media do belong to entities who just don't have the capabilities to have all of the technological infrastructure. And so a big part of media literacy is that we need to come together and take a whole of society approach. So it's newsrooms, it's civil society organizations, it's government, it's private sector, it's the education system. And, you know, and I'm happy to see that we have religious bodies represented today because they also are great influencers. So I hope that that helps answer the question.
Kieran, and we're going to come back to you, and I'm happy you open the conversation that will lead me to Dr. Prendergast now. So as consumers of media and information, the public has a part to play in the collective that actually gets to set the rules. So Dr. Prendergast, what has been the approach in your work and your analysis, the approach to engaging the public with regard to regulation, etc.? What have we learned? And should we be doing anything differently so that we can create a framework for media and information literacy that actually enhances society's goals? A little academic sounding, but I think you can decipher it.
I think there are a couple of things that I want to mention. I mean, firstly, in Jamaica, we want to recognize the role of the Broadcasting Commission of Jamaica, and you mentioned that in Sonia's introduction, that there was a point when I know the Broadcasting Commission was heavily involved in ensuring that we had media literacy curriculum in the primary and junior high schools. And I mean, interestingly, with the help of the School of Education, our colleagues at UA School of Education here, and with the support of UNESCO as well, the Broadcasting Commission would have been engaged in the high schools, in the primary and junior high schools, making sure that they understood not only the values that need to be there in terms of understanding media production, but also media consumption. And there was a really very strong integrated curriculum studies developed for that. What we've seen is that the Broadcasting Commission recognizing that, yes, the public has a significant role to play in advancing not just the well-being of the society, but in terms of promoting a democratic society. We have to see media and information literacy as a critical part of advancing democracy. And so they are now at a point at which they're even developing a digital literacy framework. So it's important for that work to happen. We have some opportunities at the community communication level, which in a sense, I think we have, somewhat missed out on the opportunities there, because because of lack of proper regulation around the community space, the speed with which the new technologies come at us and the new platforms, I think one of the issues that we have to contend with is the whole generational thing. I love to talk about the different generations, but I'm sure later on we can have a conversation around that. But certainly in terms of what is happening for how we develop a society that actually has a good understanding of what it means, not only to discern truth from lie or fact from what fiction, right, but also to understand that as consumers that we have a responsibility. And what would that responsibility be? We have a responsibility to consume, yes, the information that is shared, but also the responsibility to make sure that whatever it is that we produce, we engage in a lot of sharing of information.
Correct.
And as mentioned earlier, we don't usually go the fact check route the way we are expected to. But that's a responsibility that we have if we are actually seeing ourselves as the public as part of advancing democracy. I think whatever it is that we do at a very, very basic level, and I think our friend from UNESCO mentioned that there are those activities that are happening. I think we need to get back to some of that in terms of what's happening in the schools. We need to capitalize on some of those opportunities that are at the community level, and we need to, at our level, at the institutional level, CARMAC, WAC, all the other media training and educational institutions need to bring back that kind of deliberate and proactive approach to advancing media information and literacy. To put it back on the agenda and be proactive about, engaging with the young people as early as, I would say, the primary school, right up to the level of the university.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Prendergast. So a long-established practice of persuasion is the use of opinion leaders and celebrities. So we've lived with this. Brands have always used celebrities to advance their messages, right? So, but the era of information dissemination, particularly through social media, has kind of amplified and proliferated the technology of using people to influence things. Some good, some people are happy about that, some people are a little worried. Sonia, I'm going to come to you because, you know, the issue of influencers, yeah, have created a little challenge with people not really knowing who to trust. So it's not even just the information, but the person, right? We've always trusted the person who is paid to share information. What's so different now?
Well, I am, first of all, very glad as a CARIMAC graduate myself to be a part of this discussion. Thanks so much to WAC. Thanks so much to UNESCO, my colleagues on the panel, remote and in person. And very much thanks to Wesley for really setting the stage for a robust discussion. I want to begin by saying, first of all, we are actually in a pretty good position here in the Caribbean. We have a very strong media environment, very dynamic media sector. We are actually doing very well on the press freedom indices. And while we are still contending with what's happening in terms of these non-legacy media producers, I prefer to call them that because we really are dealing with a spectrum. When we talk about influencers, not every influencer is the same. But we are challenged by a number of factors. So while we're grateful for our blessings, there's a couple of things that we have to be keeping an eye on that are central to what we're trying to do with media and information literacy over the past couple of decades in the Caribbean. We are actually pretty much on the cusp of this. We've been early adopters, but we are continuing to see lower or declining levels of trust in journalism, which is, of course, the leading edge of our media content production, particularly here in the Caribbean. And we are also seeing that within the sectors in our own region, that there is a downward trend in trust in the media. A recent study, and I have a few figures on screen, I hope you can see them there, show that more than half the Jamaican population trusted media in 2006. However, that went down to 37.9% in 2017. So we are not moving in the right direction when we look at trust in media. And I think part of the challenge we're seeing is that trust in institutions overall is also going down. There are entities that are tracking this, like the America's Barometer, and we're seeing incidents such as the recently disclosed allegation by Cambridge Analytica, the infamous consultancy company, that they have had a direct negative influence on some of the fundamental pillars of our democracy. And that means that people are less and less aware and sure that our media are serving them well. Now, I am associated with an organization that is focused on public service media, and I like to describe it as values-driven media. So whether they are larger institutions with HR departments and defined news teams, or whether they're more independent teams or individuals who are within this sector, they have a similar factors of being about facts and accuracy being central to what they do in any type of content production, and also that they're seeking to publish no matter the technology. They are seeking to publish in the public interest, not just what the public is interested about, but to actually serve the needs of our societies. And we know that we are vulnerable in many ways. And I think we have seen that we are extra vulnerable to this particular issue of dis, and malinformation. So while the influencers probably are sort of the red flag that we're looking at in terms of this issue of needing better media and information literacy, they are not the cause. And it's not social media alone. And I'm very strong on that because our own legacy media have moved very well into the digital platforms. But it is the difference is what type of values drive the content. Are they interested in being accountable? Are they interested in being truthful? Those are the issues that we need to look at. And I'm really happy to see that we're having a discussion that says this is where we are, but these are the gaps that need to be addressed. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Sonia. And Dr. Barnes would have, well, I'm happy to see that. Yes, Wesley, I know you were moving, but I'm happy that you're with us now because I'm going to come to you and ask you to kind of take us back to almost to the top of the conversation because we've been speaking with a little bit of an assumption that while we did clarify the misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, we didn't quite get to media literacy itself. So we've broadened the conversation a little bit, but I think it would help us to focus as we continue to get to that point where, you know, whatever our takeaways are today. How would you define media literacy in this context?
I hope you can hear me. I'm in a noisy environment at an airport, actually, and I'm not sure if this microphone is up to scratch, is it? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. No, let me back up a little bit because just in case people leave with the impression that what we are dealing with now is something that's entirely new. We have always had influencers. We've always had misinformation and disinformation and outright malicious information, just that we call them different names at different times. Misinformation and disinformation was at one time resided under the whole banner of propaganda. The influencers of the past are no longer the influencers of today because the influencers of the past have lost a lot of ground, and among the chief focal points of influence in the past, you've had politicians, you've had senior officials, you've had religious leaders, and they've all lost tremendous ground. The young people are now looking elsewhere, and I think it's a good thing that they are challenging. There's no taboo anymore. They're not into kowtowing to authority of any kind. And I think that's very good. That's why I said in my presentation that it's important that we focus on the young people and that we equip them with the tools in order to become active advocates and practitioners of media and information literacy, digital literacy. For example, I don't subscribe to the view that young people are any less vulnerable than adults. In fact, if anything, I think that adults have shown. I mean, if you look at the pandemic era that we've just come through, it's the adults among us who have been the ones that have been responsible for the vast influence of misinformation on everything from the presence of the virus to vaccines. So I'm very, I'm always very positive about the young people. I have great faith that they are going to take us through, but we need to give them a chance and we need to provide them with the tools that they need. And that's why I made the pitch for, and Patrick made the point that it's media literacy as a discrete area of instruction, separate and distinct, or maybe as an expansion of critical thinking instruction, I think it's very necessary at starting from the primary level. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen by any government passing any law or any broadcasting commission or any authority saying effective whatever section 1A, don't do this, don't do that. That's of the past. And that's not going to happen. We're learning the lesson the hard way, dealing with big tech. Now, coming back to defining media literacy, I think you can find a solid basis for defining it if you look at the whole concept of critical thinking, asking why, how, what, all the questions that we take for granted in modern journalism, but that's at the foundation of what we do. So I would say it should be a start. In fact, to put a precise definition is very difficult depending on the expert you're speaking to. You'll get minor variances in interpretation, but I think that that's the foundation. The ability to apply a system of critical thinking, of not taking for granted what you're seeing, hearing, or reading. And I think that, again, coming back to the young people bring that mindset with them. We sometimes interpret it as a state of rebellion and oh, they don't listen and they don't take your own way. That's good. We want them not to behave. We want them to ask questions. We need them to question every single thing, regardless of who it comes from. And then if you get that mindset, then I think we're going to make a lot of ground on this question of media and information literacy.
Did hear you. Kieran, you had your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Wesley raised the point of, the critical thinking, but I wanted to make the point as well that media and information literacy has also been subdivided. And when we're thinking about how are we going to sensitize people and get them to be more aware and understand and be more critical, there's one body of research that says, this could be broken down into human rights literacy, into news literacy, into advertising literacy, right? Computer literacy, and then you also have privacy and intercultural literacy. I add one more to it, which is online literacy. So I think that when we are putting together any kind of campaign to deal with this issue, it helps to break down the topic into sub-themes for us to understand how we can better address the issues at hand. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Kieran. Did we have any questions from the student body listening in as we try to see how we can advance knowledge, or even a comment? Questions or comments, because we're learning on both sides. Any questions or comments for the panelists? Yes. 2 questions. You might have just run up here because I'm not. Did we sort out the mic? All right, just come here.
It's stand right here?
Yes.
All right, so good morning, everyone. So my name is Christopher Campbell. So my questions, so you mentioned earlier that during the recent earthquake, when there was circulation of misinformation, from the JCF perspective, you were able to clarify this. So how is the social media page of the JCF run? Is there a social media department? If so, how does the JCF ensure the information release is completely accurate?
So your question is about JCF social media framework?
One of my questions. I have another question, but
okay.
Wanted to start there.
All right, first of all, so the JCF has a corporate communications unit that does public relations, video, photography, and social media. So as it relates to social media, there is an established channel or framework similar to most social media department that deals with the publishing of information. So our PR department gets and vets information through our liaisons in different divisions, and I'm not going to go too much into it because I don't want to stray from what we're conversing about. And then it feeds that information to us. But remember that we are trained journalists too, so we are able to follow the steps to ensure that the information that we disseminate to the public is credible.
Okay, thank you for answering that. And my second question quickly. So it was mentioned earlier that 70 to 80% of Jamaica has internet access, so 20% doesn't have internet access currently. statistics was also provided on screen that 42% of Facebook produces fake news. So how can we improve the internet access in Jamaica, ensuring that more people have access to the internet while ensuring we reduce the dissemination of fake news?
Well, that's an infrastructural problem, which is more than, so what we're trying to deal with now is how do we get people literate? How, similar to you trying to get students literate in a school setting so that they can understand at a particular level, we're trying to find out how do we cause people in our region to have similar skill set of journalists. And I normally say that everyone is a journalist, because if you look into the academic definition for journalists, it doesn't say that you have to, for example, have a degree. So in my view, a large part of media literacy is getting the average person to use the same skills as Dr. Giblin and Kiran mentioned earlier. How do we get persons to use those critical thinking skills? So I think it's more about getting everyone the training necessary to walk through the checks and balances that we use in a newsroom setting. So when you see something online, you'll say, okay, let me check another source, for example. Let me do some comparative analysis of the information and so on. I'm not sure if that answers your question. As it relates to the other infrastructure part, I'll leave that for someone else.
Yeah, well, I guess I want to also underscore the internet penetration. That is definitely an infrastructural issue, but I think it will take a greater amount of will to address that gap. But, you know, while I agree with you that it's not so much about whether you have a university degree to be seen as a journalist, I think the important point there is that people need to be trained. People need to be exposed in those values. The people need to have a good sense of what it means you see, the thing about it is that critical eye don't just come overnight.
Right.
All right, so you have to be exposed. You have to be able to say, I said to my daughter, who is one of, the youngest is still in high school. And she would say, well, Daddy, I mean, literacy is really just about learning something. I'm like, yes. Which means, therefore, that what you want to do is to break it out into these different ways in which we need to learn about things. So we need to have a digital literacy framework. We need to have a media literacy framework. We need to have advertising framework, as you mentioned. But the bottom line for me is that people need to be exposed, and exposed in a very structured and formal way. Right. So it's not just about a university degree, but at least be exposed formally to those elements, those values that are important, that will bring you to the point where you can say that which I'm consuming or that which I'm producing, right, is good enough to contribute to the enhancement of our society.
Right, and you have that filter where even though somebody might share something with you, whether it be on Instagram or WhatsApp, you can, rather than just pass it on, you do that sort of, is this, or even if you do pass it on, you say, oh, well, this is a joke or whatever, so that people know it's not like real information, especially when you become the graduates of a university. When your friends and family and so on get information from you, they have a sense that they believe that because you're a university graduate, you know, and the information you're providing is true. There's that level of trust that they put in you. So if you don't demonstrate those good filters, or as they say, skills in being able to ask the question, who, what, where, when, why, how did this come about? Thank you for your question. You have another question? Okay. Yes, I see Kiran as well as Sonia had her hand up, and then one of your colleagues down there did have his hand up to ask a question. So when you say you want to say something, you want to make a comment, I'm trying not to have you make the comment, but you're insisting. Quickly.
Yes, just quickly, thank you so much, and you answered the question, so thank you so much.
Just generally polite.
Hi, my name is Ajamo Baker. I just had like a bit of, comments and questions, I guess. You guys were talking about the fact that interest in like public figures, well, those who do journalism has kind of gone down over the years. I was wondering, because in my head, I was thinking about some of the situations that probably would have caused this. One of my thing is that for you guys, and I think I speak for most people, especially when it comes to news in general, it's gotten boring. Anybody who's basically read some of the articles we had, no offense, will basically tell you it's way too technical, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why there's like a lack of interest in traditional news in regards to that. People don't, especially our generation, as Mr. Gibbings would have said, we don't like to be talked down to, and we don't like the feeling of being, oh, and I like how you made the point that a lot of youths don't like to be talked down. We don't like to feel as if we're stupid or we don't understand. And I think it's not really the case of where we don't understand or we're not interested. It's more along the lines of we live in a world where information is given to us a lot quickly and it's very much accessible. And we don't really have enough time to just process of, oh, this is the thing. Let me just go through like 5, 6, 7 news sources just to verify if it's true. We're very, okay, let's just get this here now. Is this what's right? Let's move on. It's pretty much that. And it's kind of like and especially with the internet and social media, there's a lot of stuff coming to us constantly. So it's very hard for us, at least for our generation, to kind of figure out, okay, which of this is right, okay, this is what's available to me right about now. Let me just read this. I might look at something else later on and so on and so forth. Those are just my general comments. In regards to, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I'm taking up a lot of time. Okay, real quick. In regards to solutions, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but a lot of us like to look at, for those of you who listen to true crime, there's like a trend that's going along where you have like makeup artists who basically talk about true crime stuff. It's just a suggestion because, like I said before, news is boring, right? But in order for us to get information, I feel like it would be a good idea to make it a bit more fun or at least a bit more interesting. And I think you guys are at least, or as we go along, I think the best way to go forward is to try our best to make news a bit more accessible to young people. Just look at the trends that make things interesting for us, and I think that would be the best way to go.
Glenn, I know you're going to Sonia and Karen, but right. I just want to underscore what he just said, because there was a time when in real time was a whole day, and then a half a day, and then now it's down to, probably a few 30 seconds. Exactly. If so many. But I think that's a very important point to make. And I raised it earlier in terms of understanding where we are generationally. And it's not just a matter of the technologies changing with such rapidity. But regardless of what, I think what is important is that across generations is that we all have a basic understanding of what that process of establishing credibility, establishing truth is. Yes. Whether it comes in 30-second bites or 24-hour book read. All right? So I think for me that's the important thing, that we have clearly established values that we're following through on.
Yeah. Thank you. Sonia, we know you had your hand up, and then Kieran. You can.
Okay. I agree with the last speaker. Traditional news formats do not hold the attention of those who are moving in TikTok-sized bites. That's a fact. Let's accept it. Let's not see it as a negative, but let's adopt and understand that. Recent research has shown, for example, that millennials got most of their news from programming like The Daily Show. And that's great. They're getting their news, and they're getting it in formats and methodologies that they appreciate. But the point still is, that the fundamental way in which, as Prof. Pendergast has been saying, as Patrick has been saying, that we appreciate the need for verbal literacy, the fundamental way in which we recognize the absolute necessity of numeracy. We have to also accept we cannot continue as a society without greater media literacy. It is a fundamental aspect of who we are. And my final point, responding to the earlier question about accessibility, this is the other side of the coin of freedom of expression. Access to information, freedom of information. We have to address the digital divide. Developing societies have to leapfrog. We have to utilize whatever means are available within the resources that we have to ensure that the full society, no matter the demographic, have access to information that allows them to understand their lives, engage with the state, as well as live productive, happy, mentally and physically healthy lives. And that is what we're really talking about here. Media literacy is not an end in and of itself. Media literacy is instrumental to the development of our societies. And I see it that important. So thanks for giving me the floor. Kalando, I'm not hearing you.
Are we on?
Yeah. Yes,
Kalando,
Kiran.
Yeah.
Kiran, yes,
Hi,
you can go ahead now.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to agree with the young man as well. News is not boring. It's the format of the news that's boring. Okay, and as Sonia said, TikTok size. We call it snack size. That's the new term, you know. And I'm happy that we're having this discussion because young people, you are the ones who have to be the news providers of tomorrow. And so you getting involved in the process from now is what is going to make it meaningful. The stories are not boring. It's how we're telling the stories, which is why I always say, you know, podcasts are getting away with murder because this is where radio has faltered in many ways. And we think like this, young people, you think like this in snaps. You don't take a very long time to figure out things. The danger that I want you all to be aware of is where artificial intelligence is coming into play. Because, you know, you're time deprived and your mind is time deprived because you're so active mentally that when there are instances of mis and disinformation and malinformation, you don't even take the time sometimes to figure out if it's real or not, which is why I played that Obama video. And I would really like to know that the young people who see influencers saying things, that you just double check it. Sometimes you can tell when it's out there, when you know it's a little too edgy, it's not a person's personality. Because understand that the other thing that is happening to you, to all of us, but more so to you, is you are the third screen generation. Everything happens in your hand. Your world is in your hand, right? When you can't find your phone, you know how crazy you start to go, right? And the thing is, everything that you look at, everything you say is being recorded. Even if your phone is off, it is being recorded. And so the way that the disinformation, I don't want to use the wrong language here, but the way that these culprits put forward things is they will say, hey, you're following basketball, or you're following cricket, or you're following this artist. And so the next ad that you see pop up on your social media feed, that clickbait, right? That's because of clickbait. And you know what's going to happen? It's probably going to be disinformation, and you think it's an influencer that you love so much because this is somebody you've been paying attention to. And so you're unsuspecting. And that is the danger that we have. And when you have those dangers, that's when democracy starts to disintegrate. The second thing is I want to go back to the first young man whose question was about Facebook. What do we do? Meta has set up offices now, and they try to address complaints more quickly. But if you see something on Facebook or anywhere else, and you fact check it or you know the truth, then you owe it to everybody out there to tell them what the truth is or to debunk it. right? Don't sit down and do nothing about it, even in your own households, right? And Wesley made the point, it's not just young people, it's a lot of old people. Give your great-grandmother, your grandmother who's 70 or 80 years old, an iPad and teach her how to swipe is worse than giving it to a 1-year-old. The 1-year-old, I have a 1-year-old cousin, every time I try to call him, because he's looking at his little YouTube videos of shark something, he swipes me. He doesn't ghost me, he swipes me. Well, the older generation does the same thing. They're going to just swipe and and I had the experience with my mother of getting tons of religious videos about all these miracles all over the world. And I had to go home one day and spend time with her and say, Mom, it's not true, So you owe it to everyone around you to be that ambassador for truth. So I wanted to just make those points. Thanks.
Thanks, Kiran. So, Wesley, I'm going to take you see your hand up. We have one student waiting to ask a question, or student. Okay, one person. She's quickly objecting to being a student. And then we'll come to you. Go ahead, Wesley.
Yes, very quickly, because I have to go in 2 minutes. I want to come back to something my young colleague said earlier, which talked about the content is boring. And I think that a better word would probably be irrelevant. For what we're finding that in our little post-colonial societies, opinion leading and opinion making is left essentially to a validating elite or validating elites. And we see the same people going around and around and around, and they tend to be experts in everything. What the young people have the opportunity to do, and I think that they're starting to do it, by exploring other sources of authoritative information in their own way that are challenging traditional beliefs and challenging our validating elites in a way that previous generations have not. And the reason why it's coming across as boring in terms of what legacy media is doing is not only a matter of the format. And yes, there are points, and both Kiran and Sonia made the point about the formatting and the fact that it's not catering for changing audiences and the changing attitudes of the various audiences, but it also has to do with content. We're just recycling the same validating elites. The faces and names might change, but they're coming from essentially the same quarters. And I'm very hopeful of the young generation, and I get from the responses of the last two young colleagues there that yes, that is in the making, and I think it's a good thing, not a bad thing. And one more thing too, and I want to agree with Sonia completely. As long as you have the so-called digital divide, this thing about media promoting democracy and all of this thing having to do with democracy would become relatively meaningless. But I think that, you know what? I think that the new technology is going to change that anyway. Because before we had handheld devices and we had dial-up, we were talking about this divide between those who had the facility to access the internet on laptops and computers. Now handheld devices have taken over. I mean, if you want to go back in history, you could talk about when radio came and what the print people were thinking, and when TV came, what the people in radio were saying, and everybody was saying, oh, well, it's dead. But not all of them are still there, but they're just performing different roles. And that's what's going to happen in terms of the new digital reality.
All right, thanks. So we're going to take your question, and then I know Kayla wanted to make a point, and then we've got 2 questions from YouTube, those watching.
All right, thank you. Ruth Howard, also a graduate of Karamak a couple months ago. All right, so I'm listening, and I'm very happy that the dialogue is taking place, and it sounds very intergenerational to me, which is great. But it causes me to wonder, though, just based on what I'm hearing and the talking at and the talking with, how are the organizations for our panelists engaging young people at this moment as part of the creators of the solution to the mal, the mis, and the disinformation in our communities? Because, I mean, social media technology it's their thing. Like right now, it's pretty much their lives in very many ways. And I think it would be very interesting if we don't even have immediate answers to that, to flip the question and then ask them, how can they engage you? What are the things that they could do that would interest you in helping to combat misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation? How could we get your energies, your thoughts, your ideas in a campaign, in a project, what would work for you?
All right. I don't know if that's a question for Dr. Barnes, who is not on the panel, or Dr. White. I don't know if any of you wanted to comment on that, or we're gonna.
I could speak.
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
speak to Karimak when. That's what we do. Can I go ahead?
You can also.
Yeah, just quickly, it's a very good question as raised about how you engage young people. And in fact, one of the signature programs of WAC in the last couple of years is the toolkit preparation on digital justice. Now, this was done by a lot of young people out of the European region. What we've been trying to do is to translate the same process and exercise to other regions in the world. Unfortunately, some regions suffer from capacity in terms of the leadership and the membership of the regional associations of work. And we're glad that Dr. Barnes has come in to reinvigorate the Caribbean region, that level of energy for us to facilitate this program. So just in terms of a quick response to this question that was just asked, but I just want to use the opportunity to make 2 points and just to follow up on Wesley, what Wesley said about, I think, the fact that young people really need the freedom to be inquisitive and to question. And it's not a media issue. It's a societal wide issue that the things we teach at schools and the type of system of education doesn't really provide that capacity and platform. So it's almost like a revolution when a young person stands up and says, well, what you're doing is irrelevant. And there's a tendency for those of us, and I just say it, to really react to it. But I think there has to be one has to remember that some of the key points that we need to emphasize that has to be transmitted and translated to the young people, as I think Patrick said, is some of these fundamental principles. There's still a principle in media and journalism of the credibility of information, the credibility of the source of information, irrespective of whether it's 2 seconds or 20 minutes. There is still the responsibility to do fact-checking of information. And we have lots of tools these days to distinguish between fake news and fact. I think we have to, in teaching, is to ensure we do not lose some of the fundamental principles with the stories that we're articulating.
All right. Thank you, Sir Charles. Kiran, go ahead, please. Yeah, you're still muted, Kiran.
Sorry, just to get back to the idea of how you could learn, and I mean, Media Institute of the Caribbean is doing a lot of this work with journalists and with students now. So I really encourage you all to get involved. It doesn't cost you anything. And in fact, we're going to be at Carimac in January doing something. And I want to thank both Dr. White and Ms. Barnes for that opportunity. But you all should also look for mentors. There are lots of opportunities out there, and you should ask for anybody who's involved to be your mentor. And you all should start practicing writing bits. I know that there are students who are doing things like blogs and so on, and you should start doing it and doing it actively and start experimenting with new forms of media and apps. You could do a full TV news production on your phone now. You no longer need a full studio, and I wanted to just say that young people, you are the ones who are charged with the responsibility. The rest of us here have been around for a long time. The world is now yours and you have to start coming forward. So do things like look for opportunities that is not going to cost you any learning at all. So MIC, nothing we do or we offer, you have to pay for, but there are other opportunities in the region, and ask someone to mentor you. The mentor may not even be within your community, right? It may be in another country, but you'd be surprised the people who would help. And with our programs too, just to let you know, when we do small grants, we actually assign editors and mentors, and a full news team is almost like a roving newsroom, and you have those opportunities, but you probably need to look for them. So please take advantage of whatever you have out there, not just from us, not just from Carimac, but from anywhere you could get it. Experience builds a world for you wouldn't know you could exist if you don't try it.
Thank you. All right, so let me go to Kayla, and then I'll come back to you, Sonia, and then we'll take the questions from YouTube.
Interestingly, conversations that we are aware of how we would like them to be had, we should start to have them. So for example, I was very interested in real estate content, but I couldn't find good real estate content that relates to the Jamaican context. So what I started to do, similar to what Kiran mentioned, is I simply got a light, got my phone, and I started to produce real estate content so that correct information could be available for my peers who are interested in purchasing houses here in Jamaica and for persons internationally. Now, I've been doing that for a short period of time on YouTube, and I have almost 12,000 subscribers. Now, that shows you that people are interested in a particular information and they will find it. So I think it's important for us as students to become a news source, a source that can be used to debunk whatever is happening. Additionally, as it relates to the creativity that he was mentioning, so at the JCF, we are already leading on that conversation. So we realized a long time ago that we were not going to find wanted men by posting a poster in a police station. Because first of all, how many of you have been to a police station in the last 2 years? Raise your hand. One person. So that means that if we had continued to do that, we would not be getting information on wanted persons. So what we have done instead is to use 15 to 30-second video clips on social media through a campaign called Wanted Wednesdays for the persons who live in other sections of the Caribbean. And we use trendy music that young people can relate to push that message out there. Since then, we've had like a 70% increase in tips and arrests of wanted persons. So we just have to think of creative ways to execute on what we want. So for example, this discussion that we're having now, how do we move it from just this discussion now to the stage where we implement it? We have to consider all these things and know that if you write a long article that is 2,500 words and put it on LinkedIn for persons to read, that's probably not going to happen. Not to say that we cannot use these traditional means, but there must be other ways that persons can access it. So I can simply think of the tactics behind how we will execute this campaign. Firstly, immediately I know that it will be a video at first, even as a conversation starter. I know it cannot be longer than 30 seconds. We have to grab the attentions of persons. And then we filter the information through them and get them to tell their stories too, because that's a very effective way of communicating on any topic. So they like TikTok, for example. TikTok is very common among the young people. Those videos are the same type of content that you'll see on Instagram. So we get them to tell the story. Okay, this is the story, hashtag whatever we're going to use, and let them be a part of the story. So they will tell you how they go through the process of vetting information and so on.
Right. Thank you, Kayla. All right, let's get the question. Sonia, you want me to take the question ahead of your comment?
Please, yes. Let's hear from the persons who are there in the room.
Everyone. This question comes from the live chat, and it asks, how do students think we can encourage critical thinking when many social institutions in society, for example, politics, advertising, religious fundamentalism, social influencers, discourage critical thinking?
Okay, question is, well, it says it is a question to the students, and the student want to answer. How do you think you can overcome the barrier to critical thinking, if we call it that? So you're saying critical thinking is not encouraged by certain institutions, but we are here saying critical thinking is what you require to have that, core literacy with regard to media and information. What are your thoughts? Yes, you can come. You didn't hear? Okay, the question was, where is the young lady? Come. It's a question to students. Yes, so when it's saying politics, religion, advertising, etc., do not, in fact, encourage critical thinking. So how do students think we can encourage that when the institutions don't encourage it? What are your ideas? Anybody? Remember, you are, yes. You have to come up so that we can hear you on this microphone. Wait, okay. You could come right up, or you could walk around, and then I'll come to the other part.
Morning, my name is Ryan Chin. I think when looking at critical thinking and certain institutions that don't necessarily encourage that and that can be misleading sometimes, you should first address what the piece of media that you're looking at or you're consuming, what is it, the main purpose behind it. So an advertisement might be somewhat misleading, but at the end of the day, being self-aware and knowing that it's an advertisement, you know that there's a good chance that it's just trying to sell you something that you may or may not need, versus someone, just a regular person, not with an organization, just posting something random, is a bit different. So you need to address what the purpose of the media is, or what it's trying to do, or who's trying to bring that message.
All right. So your part of your solution is apply critical thinking anyway. Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Head Boy. Oh, he does have a badge that says Head Boy.
All right, I think that we can simplify the information. As you know, my colleague said earlier, the news, I don't think the news is boring, but if it doesn't attract people, then they won't be able to think critically. So we can start by simplifying the information. So if I am reading something, and I'll tell you the truth, if I'm reading a news story and it's too complicated, I'm scrolling. I go to the comments and then I look for the person that's gonna explain it. There's always one person that tries to break down the news. I know we all can relate to that. So if it's too complicated, you go into the comments, you can get the answer. So I think we can start by simplifying the information that we provide through the media, through advertisements, and politicians as well. If you realize how Andrew Holness tried to talk, his political sense is that it's simple. He just gets to the point. So what we need to do is simplify the information that we produce.
All right, thank you. Yes?
Just to add to that, you can also make it more visually appealing. So even though we spoke about TikToks and they're just snippets and they're just 30 seconds just to capture your attention, we can do something like that, make it more entertaining in the sense that you are targeting the younger generation, so you want them to know what's happening in the country, in our own. So it's not an excuse to say, well, I'm young and the news is boring. We have to know what's happening. So making it more visually appealing, making it simplified and not using the highfalutin words that flying over our heads sometimes, to bring across said information to make us now sit down and say, well, what is it that she's trying to say? And I do agree that sometimes when we don't understand, we check the comment section to be like, all right. And you do have, let's be very real, when we don't understand something, there is just that one person, God bless them, that, is willing to take that time out of the day to just really explain what is happening. So that can also be a medium in which where we critically think and analyze the situation, and where we can also draw from that and give our own perspective to the situation.
All right, thanks. Sonia?
Let me begin by saying the JCF's PR program, it's lit. Big kudos. And that's not a younger generation person saying that. All generations cue into well-presented quality content. So we older people don't like to be bored either. In terms of what institutions like the CBU can do, well, it's not the answer to everything, but what we're doing right now is through our Caribbean Media Awards, which are, by the way, open to members and non-members. However, CARIMAC is a member, So therefore, persons associated with CARMAC can enter. We actually have categories that celebrate best of content from the Caribbean, digital formats, and we include all formats, vlogs, podcasts, whatever. Those, particularly under our themed categories, including media and information literacy, are open. So we encourage, there's no age bar. We encourage people who are creating quality media content to be a part of that competition. Get yourself seen, be visible in the 20 countries and territories of the Caribbean that the CBU covers. It's a start, and Ruth, thank you for asking the question. I hope people will answer. Send your answers to info@caribroadcastunion.org, info@caribroadcastunion.org. What can the CBU do to be more inclusive and to help advance media and information literacy among all generations? Thanks for giving me the floor.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm old school, so I'm not even going to talk about what are the new ways in which we can do things. But just to say that I will use this as the opportunity for saying something that I had kind of prepared as my closing remarks. I would want to say that the work that in the case of Jamaica, the Broadcasting Commission is doing in developing a digital literacy framework supported by the UNESCO. Some of that support that we're seeing in terms of the programs and projects on the ground. I know, for example, in Montego Bay, Dr. Obika has managed to pull young people onto the campus for direct conversations in what's happening in media and communication space, how it's changing, how it's evolving, and what kind of impact it will have. When I say I'm old school, I don't mean it just in terms of, that we should stick to the traditional media. What I'm saying is that I recognize that this is a conversation that has always happened across the evolving technologies and will always be there. So my thing is, if we are aiming to develop, what we should really be doing is looking to see what kind of citizen we are developing and what role, what's the responsibility of media and information literacy in developing that kind of responsible citizen. And I think, broadly speaking, that can happen at all levels of the education system. Certainly, I think it's time for us at the university level to begin to look at how we treat with what we call foundation courses or university courses. And separate out some of that if we really want to encourage a kind of critical thinking, not just in a teaching space, as he says, but in a very open kind of way in which we can go to a course that is about, advancing our understanding of our responsibility, ethical considerations that need to be made in how we produce or we consume media, content, and product. I think that's one of the levels at which we have to do it. So it's the primary schools, the high schools, but certainly at the university, we need to start thinking about how to break out something that will give all our students an opportunity to engage in that kind of learning experience.
Okay, thank you. And Sonia, I'm going to treat the comments you made last as your final comments. I'm going to jump to Kieran, and then we're going to close where we started with Kayla. Kieran, any final comments?
Yeah, a couple of things. I understand, from the youth perspective, the question about critical thinking in what seems to be a very stratified, society. And so you feel like you're boxed in. I wanted to say the response to that to encourage critical thinking is to be a journalist and get people to question things, do that with your colleagues. Because remember, there's a saying, it only takes a spark to get a fire going. And you have to be that spark. I want the young people in the room to take the reins of their future and be empowered and engage others. And I want you all to know that you are the hope, because the fight that we're in this media and information literacy landscape is a fight for mind space, right? We are racing against technology. And by consequence of that, by time. And there's no time like the present for you all to do it. So I really want you all to take control of it and understand that you have peers, you have people around you who are willing to work, and let us not do it alone. Let us do it with collaboration and cooperation, a whole of society approach, because young people, it's going to be up to you.
Thank you, Kieran. Kayla, you close us out.
Similar to the poll that I did earlier, which showed me that if I had tried to communicate using our traditional means, I would have only gotten through to one person. People are already gathered where they are, whether it's online or physical spaces. We have to find out where they are, go there with an approach that is suitable for where we are now. So there are some things that exist that we don't have control over. For example, SEO, search engine optimization. So Google will literally send people down a particular pathway. We know where they'll send them. There are things like the algorithm that we are also not able to control. So we know where people are, so we need to go there and present them the information in a way that they can understand and relate to and accept. Because there's a challenge for who gets what information. So we know where they are, we just need to go there and present the information in bite sizes that people can consume. Additionally, back to the point that we made earlier, everyone is a journalist. We all have a responsibility to debunk mal, mis, and disinformation.
All right. Thank you. And to Kieran's point, if you want to challenge the system, become a journalist, like Kayla is saying, and then force them to not box you in, but hold them to account. Media and information literacy is largely about critical thinking, as we said. Yeah, asking why, how, when, and not just taking the information that you get for granted. It's an all of society approach, to Kieran's point. It's everybody, and it's to Dr. Prendergast's point, almost said Patrick. It's for all generations, right? Media and information literacy is necessary for both citizen freedom and protection. Can we agree? Regulators, educators, and citizens have to work together to help to create a more information and media literate society in defense of democracy. This conversation is not over. The conversation will continue. We didn't even get to talk about AI and the challenges that will present for us, which is clearly setting us up for another dialogue, Dr. Barnes, about media and information literacy. Ladies and gentlemen, students, I thank the students for their participation. I actually want to applaud you. Thank you. This was, it was eye-opening as well, just to hear some of your ideas and to understand that all the editors and so on who missed this, you understand that the young people go to the comments, you know, they're not even paying enough attention to your story. They go to the comments. Somebody commenting on the story the journalist has written is what they look to if your information is and they look for an explainer. So that's a very telling sign. Would you say, Dr. Gordon Bell? Right? I'm trying to find my thing to say thanks to everybody. I have too many documents open here. Thank you very much to the World Association for Christian Communication Caribbean and the leadership of Dr. Barnes in putting this thing together. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you. The University of the West Indies, Mona, and UNESCO. Thank you, sir, representing UNESCO. It was a conversation on media literacy, voices of experts, journalists, and students, and we got a good mix of that today. I want to say thanks to our panelists, Dr. Patrick Prendergast, Sonia Gill, Patrick Prendergast, Director of the University of the West Indies, Mona, Western Jamaica Campus, Sonia Gill, Secretary General, the Caribbean Broadcasting Union, and Kiran Maharaj, President of the Media Institute of the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago. Sonia, of course, was in Barbados. Kayla Keane, a graduate student at Caramac, and also head of the Jamaica Constabulary Forces social media team, one of the best social media platforms in Jamaica these days. Can you imagine that is the police that have the best social media platform, best performing social media content in the country right now. And our presenter, Mr. Wesley Gibbings for that very, very insightful and engaging conversation. We've come to the end. We tried to be on time. Dr. Barnes, I did go over by 4 minutes. So apologies, but I think it was a very fruitful conversation. Thanks to the tech team. And we eventually got the audio right. Life is like that. Thank you. And the young lady who was helping us with the online, the questions, what's her name? Danielle Brown. Thank you very much, everybody. My name is Kalando. It was my pleasure to be part of this conversation today. And I hope that, indeed, the conversation about media and information literacy will continue. Have yourselves a good day. Goodbye.